and selecting linkage. Now over here on the right, the key that we're looking for is bind. Here we can see the device listed in the output. First, before we go editing this, I would always recommend that we save it. I'm saving it here as NVSP bind edit on the desktop so that I can reload that key if I need to, just by double-clicking on that regedit file. So as you can see there, there's the number. It appears at the top of the list here, 8798EC-E5. That's not always the case. Sometimes it appears as the second one or third one down, and those will have to be shuffled in order so that one is, for the LAN adapter, is on the top of the list. Here we can see that the serial number is the same and that it does appear at the top of the list, so we don't have to do that edit any further. But normally we would have to shuffle the order of those the binding order inside the registry there to get it to go past the cluster card that appears. And here we are, we're verifying the cluster validate configuration. This is in Cluster Manager, and we're running it against all three servers. I kind of rushed through that. I apologize. You can find more about that on my blog there. Now this is the valid SCSI-3 persistent reservation workaround that was implemented by Ross, which is found on my blog there. You'll see that it still generates a warning later on when we do the configuration. Now here you can see that I've already put static addresses on the LAN side of the network card. Now we have to put a static address on the cluster network. It's a good idea to use static addressing instead of dynamic addressing for the cluster. This is one less service that has to be running perfectly in order to maintain it and keep it from crashing. You certainly, if you assign them by DHCP and there is a problem with the DHCP server, you will lose your cluster. So we moved it from the dynamic address to a static address on the network LAN side, and we're doing the same for the network side on the cluster net. This time we're choosing the 10.10.20 network, which is a different subnet with the subnet mask 255.255.255.0. But sometimes you find that Windows gets this network confused with the 10.10.10 network, even though it's a different subnet. So you may have to choose a more distant network to configure in the set of network interfaces. Okay, here we're assigning the last IP address to the third machine, 10.10.20.52 and 255.255.255.0. And again, you can use SolarWinds calculator, IP calculator, to calculate the proper IP addresses. I'm keeping them consistent between the LAN side and the cluster side. The same octet, the last octet is the same on all three networks. Now we're going to go and validate the cluster configuration again, and this time it should be a little faster responding now that we've put the static addresses there and it's doing lookup. See how quick that was? That wasn't sped up there. And it's finding SQL Server 04, SQL Server 05, and SQL Server 06, and it's adding them to the cluster for testing purposes. It's not really adding them to the cluster at this point. We're going to add the network to the second network card as we already spoke of. And this resolves slow resolution issues because of reverse lookups, which it seems to be doing while it's doing the forward lookups. I'm not sure why it does that, but I think it just checks it. So it's resorting to a broadcast the first time I went through this, so it was rather slow doing that resolution. And so we had to go through and fix that issue in DNS. Here we're running all three, all the tests, the complete set of tests against the things. We're going to get some failures here. I wanted you to see some of these failures that you see, like the validated SCSI device product data there that appeared there in red. This was the problem that I indicated before. It looks like SQL Server is missing one of the updates, so I'm going to go through to updates again and run it, see if it finds it. In fact, when I did this, it needed the same update for the two servers, but it didn't originally show it as a proper update. But now that it's given the error, it does show up under updates on the control panel as a potential update. So we're going to install that update. So we download and install the update on that server, and we rerun the cluster test again. There it is, the patch that we're installing, and it's required to restart. So I restarted it, and later on here I reran it, the validation, and it failed for a different server with that patch. So I had to install that one and reboot it as well. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm rerunning the test. SQL Server 4, and as soon as I select SQL Server 4, it'll select SQL Server 5 and SQL Server 6. One add, actually it doesn't manually, you had to manually type that in. There was a little glitch in the video there. So we're running all the tests. We run the cluster validation tool again. This time we hope to get it working, but this is going to fail again because there's a missing update on a second server which didn't show up. It's very peculiar that it doesn't show up when you run it the first time, but it doesn't. So we went through and checked all three servers for that patch, and 2 out of 3 were in fact missing the patch. So we installed that on the remaining 2 servers, and we rebooted. Here we're installing, and we're revalidating the cluster. We selected all 3 servers there of the cluster, 4, 5, and 6, and we're revalidating the cluster. As you can see, there's a storage warning. Updates was successful. We ran the validation tool for the 4th time, and only 1 warning remains. It's safe to ignore. This warning, if I showed it here, is with storage. This has to do with valid SCSI ID vital project data. This is the error that is being fixed by Ross right now, and we thank Ross for that work. It's missing a worldwide name and on the disk and through SCSI, and that's why it generates that warning. It's done differently in open source clusters, so this is unique to Microsoft clusters that has that problem. Now we're selecting the SQL servers, and here we go, just a moment here. Alright, now we're giving it a cluster name. This is actually doing the cluster install. So I call it SQL cluster. Is the cluster 2 is the name, since I already have a SQL cluster 1. And I'm assigning an IP address that's on the same subnet as the 10.10.10 network. I'm giving it a 53 address and going through and running it with that. And it's going to go through. We're speeding up the video here so that it goes a little faster. To install the cluster, it's now forming the cluster. Installing Microsoft Cluster Server Cluster Part 3 of 3. You can see the details of this at wanfuse.blogspot.com for a written document of everything we do here that goes into slightly more detail. Again, as we were showing in the previous video, is installing the SQL cluster now. We're speeding this up so that it doesn't take so long to do, but it shall finish here in just a few minutes. Okay, we've created the cluster, and we're going to view the report and see what errors it gives us, if any, and hopefully we don't see any errors here. as we go down to the bottom there, it says the cluster was successfully created, finishing cluster creation. So we're all set. The cluster was created. The